Alright guys, Starfield is out in the wild now, and everybody and their grandma are dropping their reviews and early impressions. So here's mine, because I'm super original. Has it finally come? Is this actually the moment I've been waiting for so long? Everything has been building up to this moment in space and time. The moment where I need a new graphics card. Starfield. Oh boy, where to begin? There is so much going on with this game, you guys. I'm not gonna lie, I'm a little overwhelmed, and I'm still trying to figure out some of the systems of the game. Like most of you who played in early access, I started playing late and stayed up all damn night to get a heavy dose of this galactic space opera RPG. Let me tell you something, it is exactly that. First of all, this game runs really good. They have obviously poured a lot into making sure it's well optimized, so rest assured that performance-wise, Starfield is an absolute breath of fresh air. You have no idea how many big games that these AAA devs make nowadays that run great on console and are absolute dog shit on PC, okay? No joke, as a PC player, I appreciate that so much. Especially if you have a high-end 30 or 40 series Nvidia card, or the AMD equivalent. This game is going to be an absolute joy for you. If not, there are plenty of graphics options to tweak to get the balance between visuals and performance just right, despite the lack of DLSS. It would be nice if an FOV slider were included, but honestly, it's not that big of a deal for me. But if it's really important for you, there's a quick, easy fix to add it into the game with either a mod or a manual file tweak. I'll add a link down in the description so you can check that out for yourself if you want. Okay, enough tech talk. This isn't Linus Media Group after all. So the infamous Starfield start screen. What better place to start, huh? Well, whoever was talking about the start screen being bland and uninteresting and blah blah blah, that guy's an idiot. Okay, nothing wrong with it. It was obviously meant to be understated and intentionally minimal, so as to set the tone of the entire game. Because it's not like Todd Howard goes on record all over the place talking about how big they are on tone in their games.
Let's even step back, because you mentioned tone. You mentioned tone a lot. What do you mean by tone?
Like a place that you believe that has some grounding in our reality, whether that's historical or near future.
I think it's very appropriate and invokes a feeling of mystery and intrigue, and accentuates the quiet simplicity of space that's certainly understated in other high fantasy space games. It honestly reminds me of the start screen from Mass Effect Andromeda in a good way. Let's get this straight right out of the gate, and I'll try not to bitch too much, mainly because I'm saving that for another video. I've just been seeing a lot of reviews basically saying that Starfield is too sterile in its story or presentation. I haven't even come close to finishing the game as of writing this, but I know that the tone of Starfield was meant to be somewhat grounded and realistic, which we've known for quite some time. If you're looking for a high fantasy Star Wars or Mass Effect type experience, this may not be the game for you, but it never really set out to be that. There are things those types of games maybe do better than Starfield. Starfield also does many things better than those games in my experience so far. Starfield puts you at the helm of your own space adventure and doesn't hold your hand and tell you where to go and what to do unless you want it to. It allows you to take control of probably more systems and aspects of gameplay in one game than I think I've ever played before. I think maybe that confuses a lot of people who really just want one sort of cohesive and more arcadey, possibly more linear experience, but I will tell you this. If you like big, open-ended, sandboxy games, and you like space exploration, this game is definitely for you. Also, if you like high-octane first-person shooters, this game is probably for you. If you're big on dialogue and interesting NPC conversations and side quests, this game is definitely for you. Honestly, I'm not really sure who this game isn't for. Starfield isn't shy about showing its influences despite not leaning too hard into any one of them. I definitely get Mass Effect, Cyberpunk, Outer Worlds, Elex, and of course Fallout vibes from this game. I haven't played a lot of space sims, so I can't speak too much to that aspect, but it often reminds me of the better parts of Mass Effect Andromeda, like planetary exploration mixed with NPC dialogue and quests of New Vegas or Outer Worlds, with gunplay similar to Fallout 4, but much improved. And the lore, character creation, and the somewhat dystopian nature of the settled systems and its factions reminds me of Cyberpunk. The boost packing actually really reminds me of Elex, which is a highly underrated RPG if you've never played it. Despite all these references, it still feels like it's its own thing. It really does feel like multiple games wrapped into one at times, and that can be a little bit daunting at first, especially if you're like me and you've stayed up all night to get in as many hours as you can at the cost of some focus and mental acuity. Regardless, it grows on you pretty quick as you become accustomed to the controls and how the various mechanics and systems of the game work. I will say this, and I'm probably going to take some flack for it, but I recommend actually playing this game with a controller, even if you're on PC. Because of how often you'll be flying your ship, engaging in space combat, and then switching between first and third person cameras on foot and flipping through inventory screens and dialogue options, it just feels better with a gamepad in your hand. Big surprise, right? I think most Bethesda games do, honestly, and I think it has to do with their games being largely built for a console environment where, funnily enough, Starfield is the first game where I feel like that's not the case. It even has a quick inventory slot system, much like Fallout 4, and that's easier to use with a controller in your hand. Especially when you get to flying your ship, it feels way better with a controller, considering the thumbsticks sort of emulate little mini flight sticks in your hand. It would honestly be kind of cool to get a flight stick like the old days for this game, at least when you're flying and engaging in ship combat. But I digress. Speaking of flying, it took some getting used to when switching power between my lasers, missiles, grav drive, etc. Especially mid-combat. But the more you get used to it, the more you appreciate it for not just being a basic thumbstick and trigger setup. There's actually some strategy and nuance to it that keeps it fresh and interesting, as it feels like it requires a little more skill than point and shoot, like a lot of games that have flight combat. But it feels appropriately weighty, and the weapons, especially the missiles, feel impactful. Nothing too fancy here, but also not oversimplified. It strikes a good balance between space sim and arcade shooter, especially when you can switch in and out of first and third person, much like when you're on foot. The dialogue is very diverse in Starfield. It certainly feels like you're holding actual conversations with people and really engaging with them. I really like that they've abandoned the Fallout 4 summary responses, where you would click the dialogue option you wanted to respond with, and then your asshole character would say something completely out in left field. Like, for instance, you might have clicked an option that you thought sounded very neutral and non-threatening, like, I don't want trouble. But when you click it, your character would respond with something like, I'm not looking for trouble, but if it's trouble you want, you got it. I'm like, whoa, buddy, that's not the tone I was going for, and now I'm in a gunfight. Awesome. In Starfield, because your character is unvoiced, the dialogue option you choose is exactly what your character says, so you can actually respond accordingly. Honestly, I really felt like I had a meaningful connection with Sarah Morgan when I struck up a personal conversation with her, and found that me as a person in real life actually has quite a bit in common with her. This really endeared me to her character, which I wasn't super interested in beforehand. Much like real life, sometimes you get to know people, and you find you draw closer to those you have shared thoughts and interests with. And at the heart of it, it seems like that's a central theme to Starfield, is people trying to find their way and understand their place in the outer reaches of the galaxy. You'll hear many conversations and themes pop up about family, ego, politics, workplace problems, security, freedom, philosophy, religion, and so much more. They've done some great world building here and made it very personable, similar to what Obsidian did with the Outer Worlds. Not only that, but they've vastly improved the facial animations from their previous games. For some reason, people are still saying that the NPCs in Starfield are dead-eyed and awful looking. Personally, that's horseshit. I'm actually very impressed with the facial animations, and I feel the emotions being conveyed to me are more accurate than ever in a Bethesda game. As far as exploration, I haven't dived into exploring too many planets or moons just yet, and obviously there's a lot there, but I can say that what I've experienced has been really impressive. Seeing how the gravity and oxygen levels, solar radiation, and atmospheric hazards affect your player, I really enjoyed flying with Sarah back to Sol and taking a detour to land on the moon and mess around. I scanned it to find all the resources available, got into firefights with some pirates, went cave diving, and found a lot of interesting resources. The gravity on the moon was a lot lower than other planets and moons I'd been to previously, and it really hit home when I got to hopping around on the moon like I'm fresh off the Apollo 11 lunar lander. I also started the game with the Dream Home perk, so I got a home on a random planet, and it was really cool to hang out there, discover the flora and fauna, as well as sit on a rock face near my home, overlooking the valley where my ship was stationed, just watching the sun rise over the mountains. This game is chock full of things and moments like that where you're going to want to utilize that cyberpunk style photo mode they've implemented. Also, during loading screens, the pictures you took in photo mode will actually cycle through occasionally, which is really cool too. I love when the developers pay attention to little things like that, and Starfield definitely pays attention to the small details. Now let's talk about combat for a bit. Man, it's every bit as awesome as it looked in the Starfield Direct. It's just really clean, and the weapons have great impact and sound design. It feels good to pick up new weapons, shoot them, change them out, reload them. The enemies can feel a bit bullet spongy at times, but that's expected from enemies in an RPG. It's really no different than Cyberpunk 2077. There are cool death animations and ways in which enemies react to your gunfire that more than makes up for it. If you get a critical hit on an enemy's boost pack, they'll just spontaneously combust, which is pretty badass. I like how enemies get staggered and will fall down and crawl. They can lose their weapons, and it's just generally chaotic in a fun way. The melee weapons are pretty satisfying to use as well. I also like how there's futuristic weapons, of course, and also what they deem old Earth weapons, like the classic single-barrel pump-action shotgun. Don't forget about the Coachman, that seems to take more inspiration from Doom than probably anything else. This shotgun has some punch to it. Overall, the combat is a blast, and boosting around while fighting will rank up that skill and allow you to become more proficient. Speaking of skills, the ranking system is awesome. I love that you unlock a skill with a point you receive from leveling up. Then the more you use that skill, you unlock higher ranks that give you perks on top of that skill. It feels more like you're really becoming proficient naturally, as the game accentuates your growth and rewards you as you get more comfortable with certain playstyles. Lastly, the obligatory conversation about bugs and glitches. Now, I've heard reports that the bugs in this game are more concentrated toward the latter half of the game, and that may be true, but I'm only about 13 hours in as of writing this, and I can confidently say that there have been hardly any bugs or glitches that I've noticed, other than very minor annoyances. My character does this thing where he walks around looking like he's got an opioid addiction, which I just find funny. I had one crash to desktop early in the game and haven't experienced that again in 12 hours of gameplay, so that's a non-issue. A couple of very minor things maybe popped up here or there, but nothing other than that stood out, and certainly not anything game-breaking. Starfield has felt very polished and consistent thus far. I assume that's that Microsoft money, you know what I'm saying? But anyway, man, you guys, there's so much more to talk about. Holy crap, but I just wanted to share my early impressions and let you guys know not only what to expect from Starfield, but what I thought about it. Don't let a lot of baseless negativity around this game get in your head. Relax, avoid spoilers, and play it with an unbiased mindset, and I promise you'll really enjoy yourself with Starfield. Thanks a lot for watching, have fun with your playthrough, and I'd really like to know what you think so far, so leave me a comment down below and tell me about your experience. Other than that, subscribe to the channel if you're not, and keep an eye out for my next Starfield video as we look forward to the future.